Yeah, first of all, you're quite famous in Holland. And it seems to me more than in England. Why is that? Do you have an explanation for that?
Well, I have an explanation as to why I might be famous in Holland, but not why I'm not famous in England. I think, unfortunately, I'm the beneficiary of 2 assassinations in Holland. I don't think if those assassinations hadn't occurred, I don't think anyone would have been interested in what I wrote in Holland.
Twee aanslagen. We weten gelijk waar het over gaat. Fortuyn en Van Gogh. But try to explain that.
I think that is. I think the 2 assassinations made quite a lot of Dutch people feel that possibly they had been sleepwalking through the last few decades, and that actually underneath the calm surface something was going on which was not right. And so it became possible to talk about things which previously had not been talked about. And as I was writing about them in England, about not dissimilar phenomena, of course I think things are worse in England than in Holland, but nevertheless they're similar phenomena, I think that probably explains my success. I don't want to sound paranoid, but I do feel that there has been a slight informal censorship in England, certainly of my books, in that publishers have refused to publish them not for commercial reasons, because you only have to sell a relatively small number to make a profit. And obviously they would have sold more than that.
We gaan even terug naar het slaapwandelen, want dat is wat Dalrymple ons net vertelt. We hebben slaapwandelen door de tijden gelopen. Hij heeft in zijn boeken, Culture or What's Left of It, en ook in Live at the Bottom, een soort cultuuranalyses gemaakt die misschien duidelijk maakten waarom we aan het slaapwandelen waren. Maar ik wil er even op terugkomen. Can you explain the sleepwalking? You mentioned it. We have been sleepwalking.
I think... I don't want to sound rude, but I think the Dutch were known before these events for a certain complacency. Certainly the ones we met seemed to imply that Holland had found the answers to most human questions and the rest of the world would follow Holland. And I don't think probably those kind of people looked very deeply under the surface of what was going on in Holland.
And what was going on, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, for example, Holland became quite a crime-ridden country, for example. I doubt, I can't say for sure because I don't know Holland well enough, but my guess is that people didn't want to look very closely at a developing underclass in Holland. Certainly they don't in England. They still don't. They deny the phenomena. They want to turn away from the phenomena. And this is true. It's not just true. It's not true just of Holland. I think it's true of a lot of Europe. And for example, I've just had an interview with somebody from Belgium whose nephew was nearly stabbed to death at his school gate, and all the old arguments were produced by criminologists to say that there really isn't anything wrong, that crime hasn't risen, that there's not general violence, that there's nothing to worry about. And that, I think, that has been a response. My guess is that was the response in Holland. But certainly it was the impression that Dutch people gave to foreigners that actually you had created a society that was virtually free of problems.
Geen oog hebben voor wat er in de onderklasse werkelijk speelt. Dat speelt in heel Europa, zegt Dalrymple. Niet alleen in Nederland, ook in Engeland. Hoewel de Engelsen meer hun ogen daarvoor sluiten dan wij dat misschien doen. De vraag is natuurlijk, wat is er fout in die onderklasse waardoor de criminaliteit stijgt? En niet alleen de criminaliteit, en nog meer ontsporingen volgen. Well, we're talking about the first book I've read, written by you. That's Leven aan de onderkant, Live at the Bottom. That's where you write about the underclass and about the influence of ideas. That's one of the strong points you made.
Yes. My view is that a lot of thinking about social problems has been almost of a mechanical nature. So it's a bit like behaviorism was in psychology, that you have a stimulus and then you have a response, but there's nothing in between. Mm-hmm. That what is going on in people's minds is not important. But I said that I believe that what is going on in people's minds is of crucial importance, and what is going on in their minds often is the result of the activities of intellectuals, so that they are actually reflecting ideas that filter down to them from intellectuals. Mm-hmm. And therefore intellectuals, I think, have a social responsibility, to examine the consequences of their ideas, not just for themselves, but for the whole of society.
Het punt is dus, dat wil ik even uitleggen, I'm addressing myself to the listeners right now, dat in Leven aan de onderkant legt Dalrymple uit dat ideeën een enorme invloed hebben op hoe wij denken. Misschien nog wel meer dan omstandigheden. Wij zijn geneigd om te denken dat omstandigheden doorslaggevend zijn, maar ideeën misschien nog wel meer. Waardoor je een hele onderklasse hebt gekregen die alleen nog maar over zichzelf na kan denken in termen van slachtofferschap. Well, what we get is victims, people who are used to think about themselves as victims, yes, because the ideas...
Yes, and of course, unfortunately, this ties in with an increasingly large bureaucratic class that has a vested interest in maintaining large numbers of victims, because their victimhood is their raison d'être. Mm-hmm. They derive their living from victimhood, in fact. Yeah. So what we see, certainly in Britain, and I don't know the situation in Holland well enough, or in the Netherlands well enough, is that for every social problem you create yet another bureaucracy in order to deal with it, which mysteriously enough always fails to deal with it.
Yeah. Ja, daar hoort dus een bureaucratie bij, hij legt het al mooi uit, die natuurlijk zichzelf voortdurend in stand houdt, omdat hij weer slachtoffers nodig heeft om aan het werk te blijven, om het maar even kort door de bocht te zeggen. Can you give an example of someone, you've worked as a psychiatrist, yes, in England, as a doctor. Can you give a clear example of someone you've met who thought about himself or herself as a victim, and what did that mean?
It's inherent in the language that they actually use, so that, for example, they describe themselves in the passive mood. In one of my essays, I say that murderers say the knife went in. So that the active participant in the whole affair is the knife. Mm-hmm. Drug addicts say that they were hooked by heroin. Now, in fact, of course, it's the other way around. They have to find the heroin, they have to take it for a considerable time before they are addicted, and furthermore, they